Live in the WHIP studios in North Philadelphia at Temple University in the Tech Center, 12th and Montgomery. Room 108 to be exact. This is Rational Radio on a gloomy Friday in the city of Philadelphia. John Cole, Taylor Allen, Alex Weaver here with you until 5 p.m. Eastern. And we've had a lot of fun the past couple weeks, specifically the last month, covering this district attorney race in the city of Philadelphia. It's getting national recognition as well, of course, to this race, and we've been very lucky. We've been able to interview 4 of the candidates thus far, but they're all Democrats. And you know what? It's important that we have balanced coverage here. We have to get every side of it, and we're lucky enough right now to be joined in studio, not over the phone, in studio with Beth Grossman, the Republican candidate for district attorney in the city of Philadelphia. Beth, how's it going?
It's going very well, and thank you so much for including me, and I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, I mean, I made it a point as soon as I saw you speak at the Millennial Town Hall as well. I'm like, we knew we had to get everyone on, and you answered very quickly. You wanted to get on the show, and we were happy that you wanted to come down because you said yourself you are a Temple graduate as well.
I sure am. Temple Law, class of 1993.
Yeah, so I guess first things first, if you don't mind, let's talk about, I guess, how you gotten your career started in law enforcement. So if you don't mind, I guess if you don't mind, tell us a bit about your background for it.
Sure. So my first semester of law school, a legendary homicide prosecutor came to speak to new law students at lunch, and she talked about what she did, and I walked out, and I turned to one of my colleagues, and I said, that's exactly what I want to do. That's for me. I want to advocate for victims. So my first summer, I spent an internship in the U.S. Attorney's Office in the criminal division. My second year, I had an internship in the Philadelphia DA's office and got an offer of employment. I started in the fall of 1993, and I was there until April of 2015. So that was 21 and a half years.
So who was the DA at that time? Was it around that was right before Rendell, or was that right after? I'm sure right after Rendell, because he was mayor around then, correct?
Actually, it was after former Pennsylvania Supreme Court Justice Ron Castile, who was the last Republican to hold the office of district attorney. But I was hired by District Attorney Lynn Abraham.
Okay,
who was a Democrat.
Yes, and talk about, I guess, your relationship with the past DAs, if you don't mind. What level did you know of the past DAs?
I was hired by, District Attorney Abraham, and I was there during her, I think, 18-year tenure. So she certainly saw me rise up from the ranks, promoted me numerous times to different divisions, different departments. So I got to know her very well, and then District Attorney Seth Williams came in, who actually had started a year ahead of me in the DA's office and actually was a year ahead of me at Penn State University Park. So I had known him for some time as well.
So talk about, I guess, your relationship with Lynn Abraham then, if you don't mind, because if she's someone who hired you, and she's obviously a name that we've heard quite a bit about during these town halls as well. Talk about what you made of her tenure as district attorney in Philadelphia.
Look, I consider Lynn Abraham a mentor. I certainly learned a great deal from her. What I learned is that an office must be run with integrity and honesty, and that is how the head of any department, any public official, must conduct him or herself. And, then you see what has happened to our current district attorney, Seth Williams, who is now under federal indictment for various corruption charges. So there is a distinct contrast between the two.
You already mentioned current district attorney Seth Williams. Obviously, you worked as a prosecutor under him. Can you explain the reasoning behind your departure?
I did not like how things were being run there by District Attorney Williams. I think things were not being spent on appropriate things. For example, he had hired a woman who was a very lovely woman, but her real goal was to promote morale in the office. And, she became known as the party planner. And when you have things like that, when a support staff is making more than incoming prosecutors who are shouldering large amount of student loan debt, it's things like that that did not sit well with me. There was too much. There was not a consistent group of deputies around him. There were always a lot of changes on the executive administration level, and that creates a lot of unrest within the DA's office. It creates anxiety down through the ranks. You need consistent management. That ship needs to be sailed steady, and I felt like there was just too much going on, and there were a lot of things that I saw how he was conducting himself that I did not care for.
You talked about morale, and you have spoken about that with other reporters in the city before. You also stated that you wanted to increase accountability in the DA's office. How do you plan on doing that if elected?
Certainly. I think, first of all, I think that depends. You must promote transparency. I think that is first and foremost, and also considering that, look, we've had so much in the past years, so much official corruption that has now landed in the DA's office. So we also have to build trust or rebuild trust with the public. And that comes from the top down. So as district attorney, I think it's incumbent to post on our website and let communities know that none of our DAs, not the district attorney, not support staff, not police personnel, are going to be accepting any gifts or favors from anybody, posting our rules of ethics, working with the mayor's office, the Office of Integrity, other things, and sort of maybe, many, many years ago, the district attorney would put out a yearly report about cases that were tried, statistics, things like that. And I think the DA's office needs to go back to doing that because the public is essentially the office's employer and is entitled to know what the office is doing, what is going. So I think transparency, and I think as DA, you really need to get out as much as you can to all communities because these are the folks who put you in office. They need to see you.
So along with your talks on corruption, on your website, you talk a lot about the dangers of a one-party rule. And here in Philadelphia, the Democrats do have that dominance here. So you talk how, as a Republican, you're not under that party. Do you think then that all of those other 7 other candidates you're running against could be corrupted?
I'm not saying that, no. And I'm not saying that one party is certainly more corrupt than another. In fact, when the Philadelphia Home Rule Charter was put into place in 1951, that is because there had been several decades worth of Republican corruption. So now here we are. This is what happens. Another party, no worse, no better, has been in power for so long that it leads to complacency and corruption. No, I am not saying any of my candidates across the aisle or corrupt, but I must say that they have to look at things with an eye towards the party because Lynn Abraham, who ran a very straight hour office, was oftentimes on the ballot at the same time as somebody she may have investigated as a result of public claims of public corruption, and as a result because it just didn't have the appearance of propriety, she made a policy to send all public official corruption investigations either to the Attorney General's office or the U.S. Attorney's office. So not being obligated to the party in power or really any party, I'm free to investigate and prosecute any public official crimes and not really worrying about how I'm going to get elected next go-round.
Joining us on WHIP Radio right now in studio is Beth Grossman, candidate for Philadelphia District Attorney, the lone Republican candidate in studio with us right now. Beth, I wanted to mention that since we've talked about your past work under Lynn Abraham, what you want to do as DA, just take it back a little further, because I was at the Millennial Town Hall and you said you were a lifelong Democrat for quite some time. I think you said it was 2013 was the year you made the change. So let's talk about what prompted the change.
Sure. Look, my whole entire legal career, really up until that point, had been as a prosecutor in Philadelphia. I'm also a Philadelphian. I'm a taxpayer. I'm a resident. I love Philadelphia. And I took my oath of office very seriously when I was sworn in 1993. And in 2013, you sort of began seeing Democratic public officials start to be investigated. And it sort of began, you kind of sensed something was coming. And I didn't really like what I was seeing. And I know how I operate with integrity. I'm never going to get rich, but I love being a public servant. And I switched in September of 2013. And to clarify, many of my colleagues from the DA's office had left in 2015 to run as Democrats in judicial races. And because I knew the quality of their work and they were colleagues and I thought they would make excellent additions to the bench, in the spring of 2015, I switched over back to Democrats so I could be able to participate in that primary and vote for folks who I thought would be excellent members of the bench, because very few were cross-filed as Republicans. None, if at all, were running as Republicans. So I wanted, in Philadelphia, that's the issue that we have with the one-party machine, and I wanted to participate. And then I have since switched back. I'm not switching again. I am done. I am a Republican. I am here. So there you have it. But thank you for allowing me to clarify.
No, yeah, because I wanted to know that you basically mentioned at the town hall and clarified to hear that it was the corruption of the Democratic Party on the small scale that was upsetting you, and that kind of prompted you leaving the party. But policy-wise, again, if you were a Democrat all that time, you have to say that it doesn't necessarily make you a conservative just because you switched to the Republican Party.
Well, I will say this. I mean, look, I'm always going to be fiscally conservative with things. I think how things should be spent in the DA's office must be used very, very wisely. And look, I will always be very conservative when it comes to fighting for victims' rights, when it comes to, seeking justice, whether that is convicting and prosecuting people or whether it is withdrawing cases because we have the wrong person. You have to do what is just. But my role is to promote public safety in Philadelphia. That is my passion because nobody should be a victim of anything in our city.
You were talking about your fiscally conservative views, and another conservative viewpoint you don't necessarily approve of Philadelphia's sanctuary city status, which is something that a lot of Democrats actually do support, including Mayor Kenney. Can you elaborate on why you distaste the thought of sanctuary cities?
Well, I don't have a distaste. I mean, what I will say is that it is not the role, and never has been, of a district attorney's office to enforce any federal immigration laws, rules, regulations, sweeps, anything like that. That is not the role of the DA's office. The district attorney's office is to enforce the criminal laws of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and to ensure public safety for everybody in Philadelphia. And by that, I mean nobody should be a victim of crime, whether you're an undocumented resident, and those folks sometimes tend to get victimized twice because they are afraid to go to the police. But when it comes to the issue of releasing somebody who has been convicted of a violent felony, then I have no issue of cooperating with ICE when it comes to that, because I don't want somebody dangerous who has been proven to be a dangerous individual to go back into any community to continue to commit violent crimes.
Continuing on talking about contemporary issues, Philadelphia has an ongoing opioid crisis. You have stated, according to Metro US, that you want to combat this issue. How will you implement this into your law enforcement?
Well, I think, it has to. Addiction is not a crime. I mean, let me say that. You cannot arrest your way out of this. I mean, I have been down to where that Conrail embankment is. I have helped clean up that lot. I have seen people come and get their fix on, whether it's heroin or pills, and it is frightening. So I think it is only going to be through treatment, prevention, and education, and not just the DA's office. I mean, it's going to be everybody involved with this: the police, service providers, the court system, DA's office, public defender, the private defense bar. We all sort of have to work together because this is a heavy lift.
Do you think it's gotten worse over the past so many years? Do you think this is an issue that's continuing to get worse, or where do you see it right now?
Well, the issue is we've always had a problem with heroin or with crack or with, maybe not opioids, but we've always had major addiction problems, with different types of drugs over the years. I mean, I remember, in the 80s, when I was aware of things starting to happen when crack hit. So there's always been issues, and now attention is being paid. And really, from being a young DA in the DA's office in the early 90s, and that coupled with along of our massive rating of incarceration, you can kind of see how the war on drugs failed. So it's time for a different perspective.
Time in the WHIP studio is 4:15. If you want to give us a ring, the number is 215-204-9447, 215-204-WHIP. On the other side, Beth Grossman will be here for another block. So again, we are just kind of only halfway through our interview. There's so much more policy stuff we'd like to talk to you about, and obviously about the race that, again, is less than a month away. Stay tuned to WHIP, Philadelphia's #1 college radio station. 4:21 is the time in the WHIP studio. Rational Radio until 5 p.m. Eastern. Taylor Allen, Alex Weaver, John Cole here with you. Again, if you want to give us a call, it's 215-204-9447, 215-204-WHIP. Our coverage of the district attorney's race is still ongoing as we have Beth Grossman the Republican candidate, joining us in studio right now. Again, fun first block. We're going to have you for another 15 minutes, so we'll get out as much of this as possible in the next 15.
Excellent.
And I hope so far it's been enjoyable for you as well.
This is great. I don't want to leave. Captive audience. Hi, everyone.
So before we went for break, we were talking a little bit about the opioid crisis.
Yes.
One of the treatments to that I've seen is marijuana. And in Philadelphia, marijuana is decriminalized. But our new Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, has repeatedly spoken against the legalization of marijuana. What is your opinion on the matter?
I have no problem with the legalization of marijuana for adults. Let's just make that clear. No, I have no issue of it. I have no issue of Philadelphia adopting the practice of issuing citations for it. And I think it's something to consider. Lessening the burden of our courtrooms is to stop prosecuting possession of marijuana.
So if you don't mind, so how long has this been a thought in your head for? Because I think this marijuana debate has intensified over the past, let's say, 5 to 10 years, where I think as a society, people are getting more, I guess, open to it. If you know what I mean, even if you as a Republican candidate, not as many Republicans will probably have to share the same point of view. Wouldn't you agree? That I think we're starting to kind of change as a society that seems that people are more open to having, I guess, less tough crime, less tough punishment on it.
Look, I do agree. I think things change. You know, as a criminal law professor once said, like the law and the criminal justice system is a pendulum, and sometimes it swings left and sometimes it swings right, but you have to learn to be flexible with it. You know, you have to pick what are the battles that you want to fight, what are the issues that you want to go after, and, you know, and this is not one. I don't think we have the resources for it in Philadelphia. I think we have to focus on more pressing issues.
So do you think marijuana can be used as a good treatment for the opioid crisis?
If they are saying that it works, I'm open to trying anything. I'm certainly in favor of it for, you know, relief for people with serious illnesses. You know, one of the hardest things in the DA's office that I went through is I was chief of a unit for many, many years, and we were a very tight-knit bunch, and one of my DAs fought an unbelievable, courageous battle, unsuccessfully, against cervical cancer. And, you know, I watched the pain that she went through at the end. I watched her with her morphine, and, you know, our unit was next to the dangerous drug offender unit, and when they would come in after seizing hundreds of pounds of weed, you know, I would see them take it back to the evidence room, and I'm watching my colleague in pain, and you start thinking, would it help? So.
All right, I have to ask the elephant in the room. You are the lone Republican running for
you didn't
this
say
race.
The elephant. Dun-dun-dun.
I think it is the elephant in the room, and this is a very Democratic city.
You are correct.
What do you think your chances are of taking this?
Listen, I have realistic ideas about this and what it is, and I know I have a tough mountain to climb, but it's a very strange time for a lot of reasons, and I think the past election proved that anything can happen. Never assume anything, and in light of the fact that we have had this tsunami of Democratic public official corruption within the last 4 years, including the most recent federal indictment of our own DA, who is a Democrat, then maybe people will say, you know what, it's a time, or it's far overdue, to have more political balance in Philadelphia. Let's take a look at this alternative and see. And the other thing is, look, this is something I believe heavily in. And what if I inspire somebody else to run and take a shot, and whether for this office or whether for something else? But, you know, maybe I can inspire somebody who's going to follow me.
Over the past few years, on a local level and even a national level, polarization of political viewpoints. How do you feel about that? People voting strictly along party lines.
You know, in a lot of ways, it gets me very upset because, you know, you're only going to accomplish things through compromise, through respect, and through listening to one another. You know, there are far too many bad things in the world for us to get hostile towards one another. I mean, we have a lot of issues, but we live in one of the most unbelievable countries in the world. And, you know, I just think you only accomplish things by using a sense of diplomacy and cooperation in all kinds of areas and things like that. Things can't just be black and white or extreme. It's just not going to get you anywhere.
Joining us on WHIP Radio right now in studio is Beth Grossman, the lone Republican candidate for Philadelphia District Attorney. Again, that primary is May 16th. So let's talk about, I guess, leading up to that. You're at a lot of these town halls. You have some other ones coming up. My question is, since the Democrats have 7 in that primary, you don't have a competitor in this primary. So what exactly, strategy-wise, what exactly goes on for the next couple of weeks? Because, again, you attend these forums. But what is the outreach like? Because, again, as a lone Republican in the race, you have to target certain parts of the city. Can you tell me about certain areas you're trying to reach specifically for campaigning?
Well, being the lone Republican and with a heavy lift, I'm trying to get out everywhere. And, actually what has been very nice about this race up to the primary is that I've been included in almost every event, for which I'm very grateful for which I'm privileged, and it's given me a chance to get out and meet folks all over and actually to get a sense of all 7 of my opposing candidates, because unless I was some kind of magician or psychic, I can't even fathom a guess as to who's going to come out of this on top. So it's been wonderful and beneficial for a lot of reasons, a lot of ways.
So let's talk about, again, when you're at these town halls, you get to hear questions from your constituents. And I want to know, what do you think is the one most pressing issue that's on the mind of all Philadelphians right now that they want their district attorney to handle?
I think one is obviously the opioid crisis. I think the reform of the criminal justice system, dealing with issues of mass incarceration. I think those are your big doozy issues that people want addressed.
Let's talk about mass incarceration then. So what exactly is your plan to combat this?
I think we have to look at what has not worked in the past. Look, you always learn from history what has gone on in the past, why we have so many people incarcerated now. You have to look at the proper use of prison resources and the issue in a lot of ways of bail reform. I mean, if you look at the prisons up on State Road, I think it might even be close to 60% of the people who were there are awaiting trial, not serving sentences. And is there a better way to lower the prison population and a way to get people tried quicker or get them into diversion programs, and a way to lessen an already overburdened court system?
So let's talk about your plan when it comes to what's for bail. What's your reform for that?
I think I would be certainly opening to considering no bail or certain conditions to be met for lower level nonviolent misdemeanor offenses. I'm not talking about things like stalking or things like that, but the lower level stuff, the drug possession stuff, maybe certain lower level drug dealing things I would consider. I know I'm happy to see that New Jersey has now instituted a no bail and a risk assessment on bail on release after arrest. And so that started on January 1st. So I feel like sometimes that New Jersey, especially Camden, is almost like our sister city in a lot of ways. So I would like to keep an eye on that and see how that is working. With regard to serious violent offenses, I'm a firm believer in bail for that. You have to weigh that. If somebody is a risk to the public, risk of flight, or a combination of both, you have to look at those facts and consider bail for that.
Prison reentry and prison recidivism is huge.
Yes.
More than likely, if someone goes to jail once, they'll probably go again. What do you think that jail should do while people are incarcerated to help lower that rate?
Well, one of the things you would always hear is that when somebody was released from one of the prisons up on State Road, they would be given their belongings back and given a token and sent on their way. And if that is not a recipe for failure, I don't know what is. So I think, and I agree, I think that only with almost like a support net when people come back or return, I think we need reentry programs and I think that should probably begin before somebody is released. I think it needs to begin setting up close to somebody's release within the prison, so they sort of almost have a game plan, if you will, about where they're going to go, what they're going to do. Because look, when all of us gets frustrated to a degree when we don't know what we're going to do, or you're confronted with something new, and we always need support, at least one important part in our life. But I think that type of thing to give somebody a net needs to start pre-release and then get them out and see where they go. Because listen, people are only going to want to be productive if they're given help, if they're given support. And I think when you have a positive outcome like that, it will reduce recidivism.
So, you served under Lynn Abrams, who was known as one of the she was known as one of the deadliest DAs, I believe, in regards to the death penalty. Is that correct?
According to the New York Times.
According to the New York Times. And what we got going on with Arkansas, they did their first execution in the last 10 years or so. What is your opinion on the death penalty?
I think in Pennsylvania, from an economic standpoint, it absolutely makes no sense. As a matter of fact, yesterday they actually had an article in Philly.com about the last person who was involuntarily executed in Philadelphia in 1962. I believe his name was Elmo Smith. So he had abducted and raped and murdered a young girl who was kidnapped out of Roxborough. The last person was Gary Heidnick in 1999, who voluntarily waived all of his appellate rights. And it costs an enormous amount of money to litigate death penalty cases post-trial with experts, with appeals, not only all the way up to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court case, sometimes to federal court, and in some cases to the United States Supreme Court. So we are spending thousands, if not millions of dollars to litigate these capital cases, to use enormous amount of manpower in the DA's office, where these resources could be better spent elsewhere to see more productive outcomes, whether it is diversion programs, being able to staff diversion programs, community outreach programs. And I think you have to look at that sensibly. I'm not saying I would never seek to bring it, but it would have to be in the very rare and, horrific case.
Would you consider yourself almost more liberal in this policy considering your other Republican counterparts? Because, again, I think for the most part, the Democratic Party seems to be shifting towards being opposed to it as a whole. And it seems like you almost have the opinion I'm getting from you. It seems like you would be standing away from a lot of your conservative friends in the Republican Party.
Well, look, the bottom line is Philadelphia. Look, we don't use it. We just don't use it. And if we are spending so much money, we're just wasting resources, and you have to be smart. Look, the DA's office, like all city departments, has a limited budget, and you want to use your budget sensibly where you can get results, or you're just going to continue, spending this on something that is just never really going to go anywhere and may not lead to closure for families ever. It's a very complicated issue, but I think you really have to look at it with a common sense view. We are not Texas. We are not Florida. We are not using it.
Mm-hmm. And the thing is, though, again, since you worked under Lynn Abraham, it seems like, again, she was known as what, like you said, quote, one of the deadliest DAs. That was from years ago. And in your relationship, did your opinion on the death penalty change at all while working in the office? Just curious, because you seem like you said you see the dollars and cents of how much it goes. Did it ever change your opinion on it, or has this been like your thought process for quite some time?
Look, it has been my process for some time because, again, like as I said, the last person was used it was executed involuntarily was 1962, and for once, I'm happy to say that was before I was born. Looking at you youngsters, so you really, again, I mean, I knew that as a young DA. I mean, but then again, with Mr. Heidnick and the two people before him, they had voluntarily waived any of their rights to their appeals. So.
Joining us on WHIP Radio right now, it's Beth Grossman, the Philadelphia District Attorney candidate, who is the lone Republican in the race. That primary is May 16th, and the general election in the month of November. Beth, earlier we touched a bit on community. Let's talk about community policing. We need to talk about how we're going to improve it in certain parts of the cities. What's your plan specifically to deal with that?
Well, I spent 8 years running a unit where myself and my DA spent a lot of time going to community meetings all throughout the city, where I really found my passion of being able to face-to-face, being able to address people, help them with quality of life issues, public safety issues, and you establish a relationship with people in different neighborhoods. They know you, you know them, and that breeds familiarity, it breeds respect, and it breeds relationships. And I think part of that needs to continue to be done with the police department. I think it's important for the community to establish relationships with police officers. And there are some who are so amazing at it. In each police district, they have what's called a community relations officer who can be the liaison to the community for many, many things, who really know all the going on. In fact, I will give a shout out to the 22nd Police District, Shanna Moore, who is one of the finest community relations police officers I have ever seen. And I know her neighbors adore her. And I think Commissioner Ross is doing a great job, and I hope he understands, I'm sure he does, the important role of community relations officers to at least make that first step, or that first strong step with community policing. It's so important. It's so important.
Just a general question. If elected, what would you consider to be a successful term?
I think a reduction in crime, obviously, reduction in prison population, restoring integrity to the district attorney's office, having and also being part and parcel of educating our youth, a reduction in juvenile crime, and I think better relations between the DA's office and communities and police department and communities. I want being able to work, for example, with communities to deal with public nuisance issues enables people in different neighborhoods to see that the DA's office can be a different type of resource. We're not just that body that prosecutes people or wants to put them in jail, that we are here as an advocate for communities, not necessarily in criminal cases, but to work and help to solve community problems.
There it is. Beth Grossman, the Philadelphia District Attorney candidate who's the lone Republican in the race, joining us in the WHIP studio today. Beth, thank you so much for coming down here, learning about your platform, everything that has led you up to this point. It's been really good. And again, we hope to talk to you again soon.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.